Take a slow, easy breath and let your shoulders sink just a little deeper into rest. Let the world grow quiet around you, like a still pond at dusk, untouched and serene. Feel the hush of a gentle night wrap around your body like a velvet shawl, light and calming. Your hands are resting, your feet are at ease, your thoughts can float like feathers drifting on the wind. You are safe, you are warm, and you are so ready for a peaceful night. Let your mind wander, without worry, into a place where moonlight kisses the stone walls of a quiet courtyard, where soft music carries in the air like a whisper through leaves. Our story tonight begins in a time long ago, when castles touched the sky and stars were wished upon more than just for luck. It begins in the small, ivy-draped courtyard of a castle that sat at the edge of a slumbering forest. A courtyard where moonlight slipped through the tall archways like silver milk, lighting the cobblestones below. There, under the watchful eyes of climbing roses and worn statues, a minstrel sat with a lute on his knee. Could ease a child's fears, could even soften a stubborn heart. But of spun silver thread, so fine and light, they caught dreams like cobwebs. The lute shimmered ever so faintly. In the moonlight its strings were not of simple gut or silk, but for the stars above and the hearts that needed mending. He played, not for applause, not for coin. They said his melodies could quiet an angry soul. Every note spoke in sighs, like wind between trees or water dripping from an old well. He did not sing with words, but with feeling, until it matched the breath of someone just falling into dream. And this evening, as he strummed, the entire courtyard listened. The roses, the stones, the sky itself. Long ago, people believed music had power over the body and the spirit, that certain songs could draw out melancholy, like drawing venom from a wound. From minstrel to minstrel, like candlelight passed hand to hand. And so the minstrel traveled never in haste, never in pride, just from village to village, castle to keep, carrying the quiet weight of his silver lute. Tonight he had found shelter in this quiet castle, tucked high in the green hills, where the wind spoke softly through pine and ash. Familiar but far away, like a voice heard once in a dream. The fire in the great hall had dimmed, but the courtyard welcomed his presence like an old friend. He closed his eyes and plucked the strings, each one humming low and tender, like the heartbeat of someone drifting into sleep. The first notes drifted into the night like mist-cool, slow and filled with gentle longing. There was a rhythm to his playing, not just in time, but in feeling. Slow, slower still. Above, clouds parted slowly, like curtains, revealing a kind and quiet moon. It poured its glow onto the minstrel's bowed head, onto the silver gleam of his instrument, and down across the flagstones, warmed by centuries of stories. The song he played now was said to be older than any written word, a lullaby pass, not in ink, but in memory. Each string he touched sang soft and clear. The sound was not loud, not bright, but carried deep and wide, like ripples on a glassy lake. A cat padded silently across the courtyard, curled near the minstrel's boot, and still soothed, perhaps, by the lull of the tune. Above in the highest tower, a window creaked open, and a flicker of candlelight danced there. A young scribe, working late, paused his quill and tilted his head to listen. The notes reached him like a memory not his own. Even the castle owls, perched high under the eaves, blinked slowly and settled in their feathers. The minstrel smiled softly not at him, but at the night itself, as if he and the stars were sharing a secret. He played on. This song was for the wounded, for those carrying tired hearts, unspoken griefs, or tender longings left unanswered. And though he knew not their names, his music found them. It slipped beneath heavy doors, drifted through cracks in shutters, and curled around those lying awake with their thoughts. He did not need to see them to reach them. Just as the moon does not ask who watches, only shines. The music gathered softly now, slower, gentler, like waves retreating from shore. And with each delicate phrase, a little more weight lifted from the air. It was said that the silver strings held not just melody, but memory, that each one remembered the dreams that it carried. They were threads spun by a weaver who claimed to have once strung harps for angels, though no one knew if that was truth or tale. What mattered was how they sounded, how they felt, and tonight they felt like peace. A peace that needed no words, only presence. The minstrel's hands moved as if guided by wind, not hurried, not showy, just sure. He leaned into the curve of his instrument, feeling each note, before releasing it like breath. The castle had no clocks, but somehow time seemed to slow in his presence. One by one, lights dimmed, candles guttered, and the hush of sleep spread like fog on water. But still, he played, because sleep is not always swift. Sometimes it arrives in pauses, in softened thoughts, in drifting wonder. And the minstrel, like a careful guide, walked the path ahead, making it easier for others to follow. The courtyard was still, save for the song. A breeze moved lazily through the roses, stirring their petals with a whisper, as if nature herself was sighing along. The minstrel's fingers glided gently over the silver threads. They made no sharp sounds, only tones like light falling on still water. He had learned this melody in a quiet monastery by the sea where monks believed music could purify the soul, as water purifies the hands. They played not to perform, but to pray. And so did he. He had no audience here, yet each note was offered with devotion, each chord an unspoken wish for someone, somewhere, to feel a little lighter. As he played, his mind drifted back through time. He remembered a lonely boy in a darkened inn, who stopped crying only when he heard this tune from beyond a wooden door. He remembered a tired old shepherd who hummed it to his flock beneath a violet sky, watching stars rise one by one. And he remembered the silence after, the hush that followed the final note, when nothing needed to be said at all. That was the kind of silence he loved, not empty, but full. The silence of something sacred, just finished. But tonight, the tune had not ended, not yet. It curled on, like smoke from a candle, rising gently, lazily, before disappearing into the night air. Somewhere in the lower hall, a dog gave one quiet bark, then rested its chin upon its paws, lulled back into sleep by the soothing rhythm of the strings. The castle was old, but alive with stories the minstrel could sense in the stone beneath him. Stories held in the moss between bricks, and as he played, it felt as though the stories themselves were listening. The song shifted, just slightly, a new melody, woven into the old, like a golden thread looped through silver. This one was a tale in musica, tale of a child who wandered into a wood and found their way home, not by signs, but by sound. The minstrel let the strings sing it, soft, curious. You could hear the footsteps in the bass note. You could hear the rustling leaves and the gentle tremble of higher strings. And finally, the sense of safe return and the quiet resolve of the last chord. It needed no words. The heart understood. A lull had settled deeply now over the courtyard. The candles had all gone dark. Even the stars above seemed slower, as if they too were wrapped in the warmth of the song. The minstrel's own breath had slowed. He did not need them. He saw with memory, with emotion, with trust. Some said bards carried magic in their blood, that their music could weave spells into the air. But the minstrel didn't see it as magic, only attention. He gave his full heart to the music, and the music returned the gift. It glowed in the night, like a silver ribbon cast into the wind. A nearby fountain whispered, its stream flowing steadily over worn stone. The water and the music mingled one sound old, one always new. They became like breath and heartbeat, constant, grounding. A moth circled the minstrel briefly, drawn to the soft shimmer of the silver strings, before vanishing into the ivy's arms. And still he played, softly now, even softer. Each note became lighter, like petals falling, lighter still, like dreams being woven in real time. He began to hum, just under the breath. It wasn't melody, it was something older, the sound of contentment, of someone who has found their place, not in grandeur, but in simplicity. The lute itself seemed to hum with him, the silver threads warming gently beneath his touch. Each string sang not only notes, but feelings, comfort, kindness, peace. And slowly, the music began to wind down, like a clock finishing its chime. The last few notes rang out like falling snow, soft, distinct, fading into hush, and then stillness. A deep, easy stillness that settled over everything like a blanket laid down with care. The minstrel did not move for a long moment. He sat with the silence, as he always did, letting it rest, letting it hold space. Then, without a word, he opened his eyes. The night was complete. The moon above seemed to nod its approval, its light dimmer now, preparing for dawn. The minstrel smiled faintly, and with the gentlest touch, he wrapped the silver strings in a soft cloth, tucking the lute back into its case. His work here was done, not as a performance, but as a kindness. He would sleep tonight beneath the stars. He always preferred the open sky, and somewhere, someone would sleep better, their breath deeper, their heart lighter carried, unknowingly, by the hush of a silver-stringed tune. The minstrel rose slowly, his cloak gathering the scent of moss and midnight air. He paused by the fountain, where the moonlight touched the water like liquid silver. There, he dipped his fingers into the pool, letting the coolness kiss his skin. Another ritual of calm, of quiet gratitude. Each night, no matter where he played, he ended with water. He believed it sealed the song, the way wax seals a letter. The water, to carry dreams. The courtyard did not ask him to stay, nor did the castle. It simply held the echo of his presence like a lullaby that lingers long after it ends. He walked slowly through the garden path, his boots quiet on the damp stone. The roses bowed slightly in the breeze, releasing their soft, sweet perfume like an offering. The minstrel paused before one bloom and whispered a quiet thank you, not to the flower, but to the night, to the breath of stillness that allows music to be heard, not just by the ears, but by the heart. He passed under an arched gate, where carved vines traced ancient patterns above his head. The gate creaked softly as he moved through it, and beyond it lay the open fields, kissed by dew. The sky was beginning to pale at the very edges, a soft pearl blue brushing against the last ink of night. But there was still time. Time to walk, to hum, to remember. He followed the path, not by sight, but by feel. The land remembered his footsteps. He had played in many places, but each left its own echo, and this one was warm, gentle, accepting. He crossed a low stone bridge. Below, the stream whispered a lullaby of its own, trickling over mossy rocks and catching the first light of coming day. He stopped at the center of the bridge and listened not to the stream, but to the silence between its notes. There, in the hush between water drops, was the same stillness he found in music. That breathless moment, where nothing is asked and nothing is needed. He exhaled. A single bird called from a distant branch, hesitant, as if unsure if it should greet the day just yet. The minstrel smiled. There was a rhythm in nature, not fast, not loud, but steady, and in it he found comfort. He walked until he came to a hillock, surrounded by sleeping trees tall and bare-limbed, their leaves folded gently for rest. At the top of the hill, he sat and unfastened the case once more, not to play, but to feel. He ran his fingers across the string, silent now, but still alive with memory. In every silver thread lived a dozen dreams. They hummed, not audibly, but within him, each one a gentle reminder of something once hoped for, something once loved. He leaned back against a stone, the lute resting against his chest like a heartbeat in wood and wire. Above, the stars were fading, but they did not vanish. They only stepped aside, gently, for the sun. He closed his eyes again, letting the night's last breeze touch his face. His thoughts drifted not as worries, not as lists, but as images. A fire in a cottage hearth, a child falling asleep in their mother's lap, A window left open just enough for moonlight to kiss the pillow. That was why he played. Not for grandeur or applause, but for moments like these. Soft, unseen. Felt he imagined the people still sleeping within the castle walls behind him. He imagined their dreams, colored slightly now with the music he had offered. Maybe they would not remember it when they woke, but maybe they'd feel it. A lightness, a little more breath between thoughts. A pause before worry returned. And maybe that was enough. He stayed on that hilltop until the sun crept over the horizon, slow and golden. It lit the fields gently, warming them into the day, like hands smoothing a blanket. And with the first full race, he rose again. He didn't hurry. He never did. But he moved with the ease of one who trusts the road ahead. The minstrel's journey would carry him farther, to new villages, new courtyards, new starlit windows. But each place would receive the same care, the same song, always gentle, always meant. For the music was not his alone. It belonged to the quiet, to the hush that welcomes sleep, to the silence between words, where dreams begin. And he was only the one who carried it. Down the slope he walked, through meadows dotted with sleepy wildflowers, their petals still closed, waiting for the warmth of full daylight. The path curved gently, leading him past willow trees whose long arms swayed slightly in the morning hush. Their movement was slow, unhurried, like dancers who had danced all night and now swayed only in memory. The minstrel ran his hand along one of the trailing branches, feeling the cool kiss of dew. Each drop sparkled, catching the sun like tiny mirrors. He stopped at a quiet bend in the road where an old stone bench waited beneath a tree. He had sat there once before, many seasons ago, and the bench still bore a groove where his weight had rested. It remembered him, and so he sat once more, the silver lute case resting beside him like a faithful animal. Birdsong had begun in earnest now, but even that seemed soft, layered like gauze over the waking world. He let the sounds settle into his chest. Each trill, each chirp, each coo was part of the great music of the morning. Not a performance, but a presence. He closed his eyes and for a moment let himself drift, not into sleep, but into a lightness, a space where thoughts had no edge, where memories could rise without demand and settle gently like dust in sunlight. He remembered a tower room in a distant land, where a woman with sorrowful eyes had once asked him to play a song for her husband, who no longer remembered her name. And so he had played not a song of memory, but a feeling. Because even when names fade, feeling remains. And in a soft strumming, the old man's eyes had filled with tears not of pain, but of recognition without words. The minstrel had left quietly afterward, but the memory of that moment lived in the strings. And in him, moments like that were never loud. They never asked to be noticed, but they stayed deeper than stories, deeper than names. He rose again when the sun lifted just above the treetops, casting golden bars of light across the road. The air was warming now. The scent of herbs and grass began to rise, subtle but grounding. Ahead, a fork in the path came into view. One road curved toward a village, nestled in the valley, where smoke from morning hearths spiraled into the sky. The other path slipped into the forest, shaded and quiet, where no houses stood. He looked to both, then gently turned toward the forest, not to avoid the village, but to listen to the trees. Sometimes, the most restful places held no beds, no roofs, just quiet and earth. The path grew softer underfoot, the moss thick and springy, muffling even the sound of his steps. The forest breathed around him. Birds called, but not too loud. A fox watched from between ferns, then vanished without alarm. He reached a grove where the trees parted just enough to allow a patch of sunlight to touch the floor. There, he sat again and opened the case. He did not always play in public places. Sometimes he played for the woods, for the air, for the listening silence. The silver strings caught the filtered light and gleamed softly. He strummed one slight, the note drifted upward, like a thread of smoke, then disappeared, then another note, then two. No rush, no urgency, just sound, born into the stillness and gone. Each tone melted into the rustle of leaves, into the breeze that touched his cheek, into the gentle cracking of a tree branch somewhere high above. He was part of it now, not a performer, but a companion to the hush. And the song he played had no name. It had no beginning and no end. It was the feeling of lying in tall grass after a long day, of watching clouds move without needing to name their shapes, of hearing a mother hum while folding clothes. It was simplicity in its most sacred form. As he played, his breathing slowed again, matching the quiet rhythm of the forest. His eyes fluttered shut. The music curled around him like ivy, and time slipped away. The forest seemed to hold him in a gentle hush, deeper than sleep, softer than silence. There were no watchers, no listeners, only presence, only the joining of sound and space, woven by fingers that asked for nothing in return. When he finally opened his eyes, the sun had risen higher, dappling the forest floor in soft coins of light. The lute rested quiet in his lap, its silver threads still glinting faintly, as if the music had only just finished whispering. He touched the wood gently, then closed the case with reverence, not like putting something away but like laying it to rest. He stood slowly, listening to the tiny crackle of leaves beneath his boots. Each sound was a part of the day's new music. He did not speak. He rarely needed to. His language had always been melody, and now even that was content to rest a while. Further along the wooded path, he came upon a wooden footbridge, narrow and sun-warmed. Below it a creek moved patiently over smooth pebbles, its waters clear enough to show the sky. He paused in the middle, leaning lightly on the rail. The water babbled to itself, in a tone so calm, it seemed to speak without words. The minstrel let his thoughts drift into that sound, as if placing tiny paper boats on a stream and watching them sail away. Each boat a memory, each ripple a sigh. The forest ahead curved into hills, and beyond them, he knew, lay more villages, more hearts that listened even without knowing why. He did not always know where he was going, but the path had always revealed itself one gentle turn at a time. And when he felt the ache in the air, when he sensed a place that needed stillness, he stopped and played. By midday, he reached a meadow that opened wide like a book, each flower a letter, each breeze a line of verse. It was warm now, but not heavy. The kind of warmth that eases the body without making it drowsy. In the center of the field stood a treadle, old, shaped like a slow exhale. Its bark was furrowed and wise, and beneath its canopy, shadows stretched long and cool. The minstrel sat again, leaning into the curve of the trunk. He did not open the lute case, not yet. Some songs begin in silence. He watched the grasses wave and tilt, golden heads brushing one another like whispered conversation. Insects hummed low and steady, neither hurried nor still. Even here, the world had its music, and he was simply another note in the chord. He closed his eyes and let the moment stretch. No thought chased the next. Each arrived gently and left without fuss. When he finally reached for the lute, it was as if the instrument had already been playing inside him, waiting for his fingers to catch up. This time, he played something different. Not a lullaby, not a memory, but a welcome, a melody for the day itself. Bright yet soft, playful yet grounded. The kind of tune one might hum while stirring honey into tea or tying herbs to dry in a sunny kitchen. He thought of the people he'd passed through in his travels. A baker who sang softly to his loaves as he needed. A widow who brushed her cat's fur to a quiet rhythm each morning. A boy who ran through fields with a wooden whistle and played only 3 notes but played them with joy. All of them had music in their own way, and all of them, knowingly or not, had shared it with him. So he played for them. The strings danced beneath his fingers, not in haste, but in delight. The tune rose and fell, like birds over rolling hills, never quite landing, never quite needing to. A fox passed nearby and paused to listen. Not startled, not afraid, only still. Then it moved on. The tune quieted slowly, as all things do when their moment is complete, and when the last note faded into the hush of grass and breeze, the minstrel smiled. He was not tired, only full, like a cup that had been poured, not spilled. He leaned back again, cradling the lute in both arms, and let the afternoon stretch around him. The wind changed direction, slow and unhurried, brushing across the field like a hand smoothing linen. The minstrel lifted his face to it, eyes still closed, and breathed it in a scent of warmed grass, distant lavender, and something older, like sunlit wood. Time had thinned again. Here, in the golden cradle of the afternoon, it drifted not in hours, but in impressions. Shadows shifted like paint being stirred. Leaves fluttered softly, their hush more tender than any word. He let his thoughts move as the breeze did gently, without purpose, without pressure. He thought of a young girl he'd met in a town by the river who could not sleep unless someone sang near her window. Her mother had tried lullabies. Her father had tried silence. But it was the minstrel's soft hum from a bench in the square, drifting through the shutters, that had lulled her into a first full night's rest in months. The family never knew it was him, and he never went back. It was enough to know, to be a presence that helped, then faded like mist at morning's touch. He believed the best music did not demand to be remembered. It simply became part of the listener's piece. He opened his eyes as a line of birds soared low overhead 3. Then 4, moving like notes across a sky of parchment. Their shadows danced across his boots, then vanished into the long grass. The minstrel stood and slung the case across his back once more. The sun was softening now, casting honeyed light along the tops of the trees. As the day tilted gently toward evening, a quiet lake waited at the end of the path, a place he had never seen, but somehow already knew. The way some songs feel familiar the first time you hear them. The lake appeared slowly, as though it had been dreaming all day and was now just opening its eyes. Its surface was smooth, holding the sky gently like a promise. Around its edge, reeds swayed in rhythm, with a rhythm that did not need a beat. The minstrel sat near the shore and placed the case beside him. He did not open it. Not yet. There was music in the lake's stillness, a hush too perfect to interrupt. He watched the reflection of clouds shift, their edges blurring in the water like stories being gently written. A dragonfly hovered close, wings trembling in the gold light. Frogs called in low, lazy notes. He leaned back on his hands, grounding himself to the earth beneath him. The air was cooler now, not cold just enough to remind the body to draw close and still. This time, when he played, it was not for healing, not for memory, not even for comfort. This melody was for the moment itself, for the presence of being. Each note dropped into the air like a stone into water, rippling outward with softness that could not be traced to any single origin. He played not from the hands, but from the breath. Each inhalation a beginning, each exhalation a note. There was no audience. Not even birdsong joined him now. Only the lake, the air, the deepening sky. And still, the silver strings whispered, a lullaby, not for sleep, but for stillness, for the hush between thought and rest, the kind of music that asked nothing, that simply offered space. He played until his fingers stilled, not by will, but by peace. The lute settled into his lap, silent again, but its presence lingered. The notes, though vanished, left warmth behind them like footsteps in soft earth, or a kiss on the cheek that still tingled in memory. The sun met the lake's edge now, turning its surface into a path of molten gold. He watched as it slipped lower, without urgency, without regret, the way good music ends, the way day becomes night, with grace. The air grew quieter still, wrapped in the hush that only twilight brings. Birdsong faded to a single voice, then none. The water no longer reflected the sky, it became the sky. So seamless was the joining of lake and dusk. The minstrel remained seated, letting the evening settle into his bones. He did not need to move. Not yet. His body was calm, limbs heavy with restfulness, as though even his muscles had listened to the lullaby he'd played. Nightfall did not start. It unfolded like a blanket gently drawn over the day. A lantern in the distance flickered to life, its glow trembling through the trees on the far side of the lake. Someone preparing supper, someone calling a child in from the dark. The minstrel smiled faintly. Though no one saw, he had always loved the quiet between things, between light and shadow, day and night, song and silence. In those spaces, there was room for everything, unspoken. Room to rest without questions, room to dream without shape. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded cloth bundle. Inside were dried berries, a crust of bread, and a tiny flask of herb-sweetened water. His meal was simple, always was. He ate slowly, savoring not just the food but the act of eating, the way it gave the hands something gentle to do, the way it marked time with gratitude. With each bite, the world dimmed just a little more, and when he finished, he leaned back and watched as the stars began to appear one by one, like shy notes in a distant melody. The moon had not risen yet. The sky was indigo and deepening. He felt it in his chest, a softness, a stillness, a readiness. So he opened the case. The silver strings caught starlight now instead of sun. And the melody that followed was for the night, not for anyone in particular, just for the night itself, for the creatures that stirred while others slept, for the old trees, whose roots held stories from centuries past, for the breath of the earth. The music was low, tender, a hush of tones, like a promise kept long after the need for it had passed. He let each note bloom slowly, not because he meant to delay but because there was no reason to rush. Some melodies take their time, like a candle burning low in the corner of a silent room. The lake echoed it faintly, like a second instrument made of stillness, and high above, the stars did not flicker. They listened. The tune curved inward now, quieter and even slower, as if wrapping a shawl around tired shoulders. You could almost feel it hum in the belly of the earth, of presence, of peace, the vibration of care. He didn't need to finish the song. It knew how to end itself. And when his hand stopped moving, the final notes lingered on the air, just long enough to be felt, then vanished like breath on a mirror. He closed the case gently. Not because he was done, but because the music had chosen to rest. He lay back on the grass, eyes on the stars, arms folded beneath his head. The chill of night was soft, not biting. It cooled the skin just enough to remind him he was here. Fully, simply, here. The ground beneath him was firm, the sky above vast, and in between, he floated light as a sigh. There were no plans in his mind, only stillness, only breath. He felt the song still inside him, not as a tune, but as a calm. He would sleep here tonight, by the lake, under the stars. No roof above, no walls around, only the sky's long embrace. And when he closed his eyes, it was not to block out the world, but to join it more deeply, to let go into it, like a pebble into water, like a note into silence, like a dream rising. He dreamed, not in pictures, but in sensations, the feeling of warm sun on his face, the sound of wind through pine needles, the comfort of voices he'd once known but hadn't heard in many years. No faces came, no names, only peace. When he awoke, the sky was a faint silver blue, just before dawn, when the world forgets its shadows for a moment, and everything holds still. His breath moved slowly. His body rested light atop the earth, like a leaf gently settled on water. He did not rise at once. He listened to the faint rustling of reeds by the lake's edge, to the sleepy murmurs of the waking wind, to the soft pulse of his own heartbeat. That, too, was music. And so he lay there a while longer, eyes half closed, letting the world arrive around him one tender detail at a time. He rose at last with the care of someone lifting something fragile, not because the day demanded it, but because the moment invited it. The sky above was brushed with lavender and milk-white clouds, lit softly from beneath. The kind of sky that makes you pause. He stretched, long and easy, then opened the case once more, not to play, but simply to check the strings. Each one glinted faintly, catching the first light like morning dew. He touched them gently, running his fingers across them like stroking the feathers of a sleeping bird. No sound was needed, only the contact, the acknowledgement. He stood, slung the case over his shoulder, and looked once more at the lake. It shimmered softly, not asking for anything, not offering anything, just being. And he smiled. The road ahead would lead him to new places, some grand, some humble, some that needed song, others that needed only silence. He never questioned where he was meant to go. He trusted the hush. It always whispered when it was time to pause, and when it was time to continue. As he walked through the trees, the sun rose gently behind him, casting long, golden beams across the forest floor. Squirrels chattered in low, sleepy tones. A deer lifted its head, blinked, then lowered it again. Even the world seemed to stir with care, as though waking slowly from a beautiful dream it didn't want to leave. He walked on, one step, then another, softly, steadily, without hurry. He knew that somewhere ahead there would be another courtyard, another window open to the night, another listener resting their head and waiting for something they could not name. And he would be there, not to perform, not to fix, but to play, to offer the thread of peace, to hold the night open just long enough for someone else to fall into rest. He moved like shadow and song present, but never demanding attention, only leaving behind the echo of calm, the kind that lingers in the chest long after the sound has stopped, the kind that lives in silence. A village rose on the horizon, modest, nestled between two low hills, with smoke rising from its chimneys. Like dreams curling into daylight, roosters crowed in the distance, bells clanged gently in a chapel tower. The world was beginning its rhythm again. The minstrel arrived as the market was being set. Baskets of bread, bundles of herbs, cloth stretched out for dyeing in the sun. He nodded to those he passed. They smiled softly, curiously. Some knew him by face. Others simply felt the hush that followed his steps. He carried his lute, like a promise never loud, never flashy, just there, waiting, ready, listening. Children ran past him, their feet slapping dust into the air, their laughter high and clear. He paused by a fountain. Its waters gurgled cheerfully, spilling over smooth stones into a round basin, where birds dipped in and out. He sat on the ledge and opened his case, not to play, just to let the air touch the strings. They seemed to glow in the sunlight, no longer moonlit and mysterious, but warm and familiar. A woman selling honey paused nearby, watching him. "Will you play?" she asked softly. He looked up and met her eyes. She wasn't pleading, only hoping. And so he nodded once. He tuned slowly, letting the morning sounds gather like an audience. The clink of jars, the distant hammering of nails, the rustle of linen. Then he played. The notes were light, rising like the scent of cinnamon bread from a baker's window. Not a lullaby this time. Not a hush, but a welcoming, a new day kind of melody. One that said, "You are here." And that is enough. The villagers slowed. Not stopped, just slowed. Their hands moved gentler. Their chatter softened. The music was not loud. It didn't need to be. It poured into the space between footsteps and filled the cracks where worry had settled. One man put down his load and simply listened. A child leaned against her mother's apron, eyes wide. Even the dog stilled, heads tilted, ears alert. It wasn't enchantment. It was permission. Permission to feel, to be, to breathe deeper than the surface. The tune shifted once more, subtle, like clouds rearranging themselves. Now it was steadier, rooted, a melody of home. The kind of song that feels like sitting on your doorstep at dusk, sipping something warm and watching light fade with no need to chase it. And when he finished, the silence afterward was rich. Not awkward, not hollow, just full. the way earth holds seeds before they grow. He closed the case, stood. The villagers said nothing, but their silence was kind. They had received what was offered, and in return, they gave peace. He walked on, down a narrow lane, past gardens, toward the edge of town. He passed a woman hanging laundry and nodded. She smiled not, just with her mouth, but with her shoulders, her posture, as if a small weight had lifted. That was enough. The minstrel moved toward the fields again, where flowers swayed low and goldfinches danced in pairs. The road stretched quiet before him. No signposts, no map, only the hush, and the hush would always lead him where he was needed. The road curved beside a river now broad, and its banks lined with reeds and willows, whose roots curled deep into the mud. The minstrel walked beside it, step after steady step, his boots brushing the long grass with a rhythm like a quiet metronome. The sun was high again, but not harsh. It warmed at the top of his shoulders and painted silver on the water below, as if answering the glint of his lute. A family of ducks drifted by, the smallest paddling hard to keep up, sending ripples out in perfect little circles. The minstrel paused and watched, not because he had to, just because it was beautiful. He sat by the river bank, where the earth was soft, and leaned against a smooth, round stone. It had the warmth of long-held sunlight. His body relaxed into the shape of stillness again. The lute stayed beside him, unopened. There was no need to play just yet. The song today was not in strings, it was in the hush of reeds swaying, in the river's steady murmur, in the lazy hum of bees circling lavender patches beyond the fence. A farmer's voice drifted faintly from the hills calling, then laughing, then silent again. Somewhere, a wind chime trembled. 3 notes, then 2, then rest. He breathed deeply, and with each breath, the world around him seemed to soften further. It was as though the land had grown used to his quiet, and now offered its own in return. There was no loneliness in this solitude, only a sense of being gently held by the moment. Eventually, the silver strings did call to him. He opened the case, slow as always, careful as always. He didn't tune. He didn't need to. The lute was ready, as if it too had been listening all along. He began to play not a song of place, but of passage, a tune for walking, for drifting, for a time sliding gently past. Each note was like a footprint pressed into soft earth air, for a moment, then fading with grace. The river echoed back, soft and watery, a harmony not of pitch, but of feeling. His fingers danced, not fast, but sure like someone who knows the path even with eyes closed. The song looped in quiet circles, not quite repeating, not quite moving forward. It held you in place, like rocking in a boat with nowhere to go but the rhythm itself. He thought of every journey he had ever taken, every village, every inn, every garden wall he'd leaned against. While playing in the dark, he thought of every soul who had ever paused beside him even for a breath and listened, not to him, but to themselves, because that's what his music was for, to open a small door inside the heart, just wide enough for stillness to enter. He played until the light began to change again, not dimming, just softening, like velvet being pulled over the sky. Then, slowly, the song ended. The lute returned to its rest. The minstrel stood again and looked across the river. Beyond it, a bridge curved in a slow arc, wooden, mossy, with flowers growing from the edges. He crossed it without hurry. Each plank creaked beneath his weight, each sound answered by birds nesting in the beams above. And on the other side, the road turned toward trees again. He followed because that was always the way. Play, rest, listen, move, and carry the hush with you. The forest thickened again, cool and shaded. Leaves whispered secrets overhead, their sounds soft as breath. The minstrel moved slowly beneath the canopy, where light filtered like spilled honey. Moss-covered stones and fallen logs, cushioning his steps in green. He paused at a small clearing where wildflowers leaned toward the light, fragile and bright. A single spiderweb shimmered between 2 branches, glistening with dew, like a string of tiny jewels. He knelt, watching a beetle trace the thread with delicate feet. Life was small here, careful, quiet. The lute case hung loose on his back. He did not feel the need to play. Some places held their own music. He breathed it in. The air was cooler here, touched with the scent of pine and earth. His fingers brushed the fabric of his cloak, grounding him to the moment. Every breath, a note in the silent song of the woods. He let his mind float free, empty of concern. No plans, no memories, just the present. The way wind moves through branches, the way light falls on a leaf, the way a heart beats steady and calm. He sat on a fallen log and closed his eyes. The world narrowed to the pulse in his chest, the rhythm of breath, the subtle weight of being, the silence between sounds. And then, softly, he reached for the lute, not to fill the quiet, but to honor it. His fingers found the silver strings, plucking one note at a time, slowly, intentionally. Each note a drop of water falling into a still pool. The sound carried far without force. It blended with the rustling leaves and distant bird calls. He played a song with no words, no story, only feeling. A lullaby to the woods, to the creatures that stirred beneath the dark soil, to the ancient trees that had stood witness to centuries. The melody rose and fell like a slow wave, soft as feathers, light as mist. He imagined the forest breathing with him, the music weaving through branches, wrapping around trunks, a gentle embrace. The notes became whispers. Whispers became silence. He let the final tone hang in the air. Then he closed the case and rested his hands in his lap. The woods held their breath, and the minstrel smiled. He rose with the quiet grace of someone who knows the world in every step. The path ahead was long, but he carried the song inside, a soft thread to follow. The path led out of the woods and into rolling hills where wild grasses swayed like ocean waves beneath a gentle breeze. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with strokes of rose and amber. The minstrel walked without hurry, his silhouette stretching long against the fading light. The air was filled with the scent of earth and late blossoms, a quiet perfume that settled softly around him. In the distance, the outline of a small village appeared, smoke rising from chimneys, the faint sound of voices drifting on the air. He approached slowly, letting the quiet weave around him like a cloak. The villagers were finishing their day, children chasing each other through the streets, laughter trailing behind them like ribbons. He paused at the edge of the square, where a few lanterns had been lit, their warm glow flickering gently. Without a word, he opened his lute case and lifted the silver lute into his hands. The strings shimmered faintly in the twilight, ready to sing. He began to play a soft melodious song of welcome, of rest after a long journey. The notes were like whispers carried on the evening breeze, gentle and soothing. People stopped their tasks, turning toward the sound as if waking from a pleasant dream. An old woman smiled, her eyes misty with memories. A child nestled against his mother's side, eyes wide and still, the music wrapped around them. A tender embrace that softened tired hearts. The minstrel's fingers danced lightly across the strings, weaving a lullaby that spoke of peace and gentle hope. He played not for applause or recognition, but to offer a moment of calm amid the busy world. As the last note faded, silence settled softly over the square. The villagers exchanged quiet glances, their faces softened by the shared experience. Without a word, the minstrel closed his lute and packed it away. He felt the warmth of their gratitude, not spoken, but felt deep in the stillness. Turning away, he walked toward the hills once more, the night wrapping around him like a velvet blanket. The stars began to twinkle overhead, each one a tiny beacon in the vast dark. He lifted his face to the sky, breathing in the cool night air. The journey was far from over, but for now, he carried the song within a steady flame to guide him through the shadows. The hills grew steeper as he traveled, folding around him like quiet hills in a lullaby. The breeze soft, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth. Even the stones beneath his feet seemed to hum softly a low, comforting sound that blended with the distant call of an owl. As twilight deepened, the minstrel found himself at the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast valley. The moon hung low, a silver crescent casting pale light over the landscape below. He sat at the cliff's edge, the lute resting beside him, strings glinting faintly in the moonlight. The valley stretched out in peaceful shadows, dotted with flickering lights from scattered homes. He felt the weight of the world settle softly around him, not heavy, but a gentle press, like the arms of a long-forgotten friend. Closing his eyes, he let the sounds of the night wash over him. The rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of a stream, the occasional hoot of the all became part of the music within. His fingers brushed the lute strings lightly, coaxing out a melody soft and slow. It was a song of waiting, of patience, of quiet strength. The notes drifted into the night, weaving through the trees and hills like a gentle breeze. He played until his hands ached with the beauty of the moment. Then, slowly, the music faded into the hush. The minstrel leaned back against the rock, gazing up at the stars. Each one seemed to pulse with a quiet light, a steady heartbeat in the vast silence. He felt himself becoming part of that rhythm, the endless cycle of night and day, sound and silence, movement and rest. As sleep tugged gently at his eyelids, he smiled, for in that moment, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The night deepened around him, cool and quiet, wrapping the world in a blanket of stars. The minstrel rested there for a while longer, feeling the steady pulse of the earth beneath him. His breath slowed, matching the rhythm of the night. He thought of all the places he had been, all the people who had listened, not to him, but to the silence he helped create. The music was a bridge between the noise of the world and the stillness inside. He packed his lute carefully and stood. The path before him wound down into the valley, soft underfoot and lined with wildflowers. The scent of jasmine and honeysuckle drifted on the air. As he walked, the moonlight painted silver patterns on the leaves, and the shadows danced quietly. He came to a small village nestled between the hills. The houses were quiet now, doors closed and windows shuttered. He paused at the edge of the square, feeling the hush of night settle around him. He opened his lute case and lifted the silver lute gently. His fingers found the strings, and he began to play a song of rest. Not loud, not bright, but soft as a whisper, tender as a breath. The notes drifted through the empty streets, touching the stone walls and wooden doors. The village listened. Even in sleep, it held space for the music. The minstrel played until the last note faded into the night air. He closed the case and smiled softly. Turning away, he walked toward the hills once more. The road was quiet. The stars watched over him, and the silver lute rested peacefully against his side. The night air was cool and crisp. As he walked onward, the path winding through gentle slopes carpeted with soft moss and fallen leaves. Each step was quiet, the sounds of the world soft to a delicate hush. Above him, the stars sparkled faintly, as if sharing secret songs across the dark. The minstrel's thoughts drifted like clouds, light and He remembered a child he had met in a distant town, wide-eyed and curious, who asked if the silver lute could sing dreams. He had smiled then, knowing the answer was both simple and vast. Music, he knew, did not sing dreams, but it held the space where dreams could grow. He reached a clearing where a single oak tree stood tall and proud. Its branches spread wide, leaves rustling softly in the breeze. He settled beneath its shade, the earth cool beneath him. The lute rested across his lap, its silver strings shimmering faintly in the moonlight. He closed his eyes and played a gentle melody. It was a song for the night, soft, slow, and steady. Each note was a breath, each pause a heartbeat. The music wrapped around him like a warm shawl, carrying him gently toward rest. He imagined the leaves above, swaying in time with the tune, the stars blinking softly in approval. The world grew quiet, wrapped in the embrace of song and silence intertwined. As the last note faded, the minstrel rested his hands and smiled softly. He knew that wherever he traveled, the silver lute would carry the music of peace, and that was enough. The dawn began to whisper at the edges of the night, a soft glow that hinted at new beginnings. The minstrel rose slowly, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath his feet. He gathered the silver lute carefully, its strings still humming faintly with the echoes of the night song. He looked toward the horizon, where the first light spilled like liquid gold over the hills. There was no hurry now, only the steady rhythm of breath, the gentle pulse of the world waking. As he walked toward the rising sun, he carried with him the music of the moonlit night, the lullabies woven from silence and light. Each step was a quiet promise, a song without words, a gentle thread connecting hearts to rest. And though the journey would continue, the minstrel knew one thing clearly. Wherever he went, the silver lute would always sing softly, a reminder that peace lives in the stillness between notes, and that every heart holds its own song, waiting to be heard. He smiled, a slow, easy smile, as the sun warmed his face, and in that moment, the world felt vast and tender, ready for dreams, ready for rest, ready for the music to carry him home.